So much of what we talked about in that last panel was centered around the mission. And so let's keep that conversation going. For our next panel talking about mission critical innovation, please welcome Gharun Lacy, the Deputy Assistant Secretary and Assistant Director at the Diplomacy and Security Service for Cyber Technology and Security, large title, at the Department of State.
Gharun, welcome.
Thanks, Billy. How you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I can't stop looking at your kicks, though. They look.
There's a story behind it. I'll tell anybody who wants to know later.
Well, that's we'll save that one for later. Gharun, really excited to have this conversation. Been looking forward to it for a while. We're going to be talking about driving mission-critical innovation, and I kind of teased it out in my opening remarks that state is one of those agencies when you think about the edge and the places that the edge might be, that you're often thinking of the edge on foreign soil. Let's start again, I think, by sort of setting a foundation for this conversation, giving the audience an understanding into what you're thinking about when you think about the edge and sort of how that's evolving. We have known the operations of the State Department historically, but I'm imagining as more and more digital technology comes about, emerging technology, AI, and things of that nature, which we'll get into, that edge operation is largely evolving. So let's talk about it.
Sure. No, State Department is a perfect place to explore that concept of innovation at the edge. For us, 170 countries, 220 plus locations all around the world, all we do is operate on the quote unquote edge. For us, you vision an edge as an embassy or a consulate. Now, each one of those embassies and consulates has their own culture, their own risk tolerance, their own priorities, their own missions that can be drastically different from the same type of facility just 3,000, 4,000 miles away in another country. So when you talk about innovation at the edge, it has to be tied to the mission sets of those particular posts, those missions, those risk tolerances, those ideals that sit within that embassy or consulate. That can drive, whether it's applications, whether it's hardware, that can drive a whole set of different capabilities that need to be delivered. And those capabilities have to come from the business owner. They can't come from the technologist. They have to come from the culture that is instilled from that ambassador on down at that location.
That's fascinating. I mean, we think so often in the federal space about the enterprise approach and trying to take a one-size-fits-all, but that just throws that completely out the window. You're operating in so many different places, and each one has its own sort of focus and different flavor, if you will. So that's very interesting. So when we touch on that innovation and thinking about why it's important to keep up with that evolution, what ways is the State Department pushing that innovation? Are there examples you have to share about how, again, each embassy or installation may be a little different, but some examples of how they are innovating?
Absolutely. Just this morning, I'm late and I'm apologizing for it, but just this morning I was going through some of our AI and diplomacy awards. I'm on the panel for finding folk at different embassies and consulates who are using AI and data-driven applications to change the way they do business at their individual embassies. And some of the things that you see are just fascinating. We have one particular post in Africa who is using data to drive their mission against dis, and malinformation. We have other posts that are streamlining visa processes and application processes. We have other posts that are streamlining security processes. What's so interesting and cool about it is emerging technology just becomes that way to take what you're already doing and do it better, right? We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not becoming something different. We're finding ways to be more efficient, cleaner, and safer at the spots where we are. And seeing all of that be driven by posts means that as technologists, our job is just to provide the flexibility, not the 6,000-mile screwdriver that's telling posts what to do, but provide them with the flexibility and the secure mechanisms to explore their own imagination to make their own business more efficient.
That's great. I promise we didn't coordinate this, but you were spending your morning looking at awards and sort of weighing through those. That's an incentive. I wanted to ask about incentives, how you incentivize innovation, because that's such a big thing, especially in this federal space where there's risk aversion. People aren't always willing to take risks and innovate. So, how do you incentivize? Awards are one way, but are there others? And sort of what's the risk of not innovating if you're not incentivizing that innovation?
The previous panel talked about it really well, that focus on mission. When we make sure that whatever the advanced technology, the emergent technology, empowers the individual at post to focus on mission, well, there's the natural incentivization right there. The second part we do it is by making sure that us as security practitioners have helped develop the environment so that it's secure, and that we also message along with our technologists. I like to stand side by side with our chief data officer whenever they're talking about new emerging technology, whether it's AI or anything like that. I like to stand right next to them and let the user know, we've evaluated this together. We've gone out of our way to break it. We've thought like bad guys. We've been inside. We tore it apart and put it back together. So as long as you're using it the way that you're supposed to, you're not going to hurt it, right? As long as you're doing this regular, simple, operational security things, you're not going to break it. It is absolutely safe for you to use. So go to town, fail quickly, and have fun.
Yeah, and it's a great also example of partnership and how you can work together with across organizations. I'm curious, you mentioned, just the vast array of different foreign locales that the State Department's in. Some obviously are in well-established, developed nations, others not so much. Some of them are in more austere environments. So I'm curious, as you think about the playbook for innovation that you might hold, so to speak, whether that's something you actually have or you just kind of keep in the back of your mind, how does that change when you think about those more austere environments?
When you look at an austere environment, you're going to encounter a vast, complex array of different tech debt, legacy applications across a broad spectrum, whether it's hardware or application. So you're gonna encounter a very uneven operational surface. We just have to be prepared for that. In that sense, the idea of pushing capabilities out to these locations has to take a backseat. There's no substitution for boots on the ground. There's no substitution for getting the technologists out to post, on the ground, before they touch any hardware, before they install any software, talking to the business owners at post, understanding what the mission is, understanding what they're trying to accomplish. And as a technologist for 25 years, it took me a while to remember to ask this question. Understand what the business owner is actually afraid of. Understand what scares them. Understand what capability, if it goes down, really changes the complexion of what they're doing. Now, when it's time to deploy, you frame the new technology in terms of how the business owner has told you what's important to them. Now you have a partner, and now you have a little bit of leeway to do something fun in a place where it's probably never happened before.
Interesting. Security is your mission, a big part of what you do. How do you build security into your innovation? Obviously, security is often an afterthought, or has been previously. That's not the way to go about it, so to speak. So, how are you thinking about security as part of your innovation stack?
Not to be corny, everyone knows the phrase DevSecOps and all of the things that go with that. We like to flip that phrase on its head and call it SecDevOps. We like to be there as part of the idea of the new emerging technology and the new capability. I'll give you a classic example. Our former chief data officer, I was sitting in the room with him at the U.S. Department of State when he told senior management at State that he was going to deploy a chatbot at the U.S. Department of State. We walked out of that meeting, we were walking the hallway together, I looked at him, I said, Matthew, that sounds really cool, do you know how to do that? He said, no. And then he looked at us and said, hey, do you guys know how to secure a large language model? We said, no. And from that point on, we just kind of nodded and looked at our heads like, we're going to have a lot of fun. So as the concept of deploying this chatbot was being discussed, we were infusing that conversation with real-world experience from incident response, from the fights that we've had with adversaries over the last 4 or 5 years. So never was there a point during that development cycle where our data team had to roll back because we found a problem, right? We were finding problems in real time. They were fixing them in real time. 8 months later, a chatbot was actually deployed to our users. 8 months, that's light speed for an advanced capability like that. And it happened because we were there having a lot of fun, breaking a lot of stuff, but breaking it early so that there was no rollback or loss of time.
We've talked a lot about AI in this conversation, maybe indirectly, but there's more and more of a push to adopt emerging technology. AI is not obviously the only emerging technology. There's many others, but there's this push a lot around AI. So tell me about that, how you're kind of grappling with that. But also, what about when you think again about the mission of the State Department, what about that plumbing that's needed to support that? The infrastructure, the connectivity, the data and compute elements. How are you bringing that all together so that AI is something that you can do at the edge in the State Department?
Yeah, I'm always going to sound like a broken record when we talk about emerging technology, AI, what have you. It's always an excuse for me to focus back on our fundamentals. What is the inventory of our data? What is the inventory of our APIs? Do we know where everything is? Do we know how everything is configured? I think it's the non-sexy part, but it's the part that makes everything else work. I heard the previous panelists say this really isn't a technology problem, right? This is more of a people and organizational problem. And when we talk about austere environments, sometimes the most austere environment you have is your headquarters local environment. We think of the State Department and all of these embassies all around the world. Well, domestically, we're 32 different bureaus. 32 different bureaus, again, with different cultures, different risk tolerances, different missions. Some of those bureaus don't even feel like they should be as part of the State Department. And that's not common to us. That's every federal agency you look at. With that type of diversity in mission set and structure, you also have diversity in infrastructure, diversity in capability, diversity in skill sets. So being able to talk that language and meet that customer, that bureau where they are, and provide them the tools that they need to produce their mission goals is always, always going to be the key.
I want to touch on data, and it may be the final thing we talk about, but you mentioned the data element of that, and we've talked about it frequently throughout our conversations today. How important is it to properly manage data as part of your environment, because those installations are often in austere environments and disconnected or maybe not readily available. So how important is that data management for things like optimization, security, resilience, and so on?
It's one of the most important factors because it can tell you where to focus your activity and to focus your resources. You have to be able to identify that data that is absolutely critical to you to perform that mission. The interesting and fun part about it is as the threat environment shifts, the data that becomes most important to your mission shifts. At the State Department, there can be a geopolitical event that brings a new player onto the field. That new player brings new capabilities. Those new capabilities expose different attack chains, and those attack chains now point to different data sets.
Sure.
Data sets that may not have been a priority a month ago. So focusing on that fundamental so that at the very least, you know where those data sets are and can push countermeasures to them when you need to, is key. None of us have unlimited resources, with the exception of my DoD colleagues. None of us have unlimited resources. There's no way we're going to be able to get to all of those vulnerabilities all the time. But we have to take a threat-driven approach to how we're prioritizing protecting the data and how we're prioritizing making sure that it's accessible to everyone. I think that key part is being locked into that environment, knowing what's happening right now, and being able to use your resources efficiently.
Gharun, it's very fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for your time. Let's give him a round of applause for joining us today.